Welcome to another episode of Compass. Things that we are going to share with you. We truly want you to analyze and check in with your life because this is the platform we are going to discuss about your life, about you. So take a moment and reflect on your life and see whether it resonates with your life experience, with your personal experiences. It is unlikely that there is anyone in this audience who has escaped experiencing stress in your life. In fact, there may be some among you who have even experienced conditions like chronic stress, which is caused by a prolonged stress. So let's take a realistic approach and give this human hurdle a fresh perspective. Because oftentimes we hear people talk about how stressful they feel in this fast-paced society. Think about your life. Aren't you always trying to fulfill expectations one after the other and get yourself entangled in this web of stress? This is why stress has become a global concern. Because not only it wrecks your happiness and affects on your mental health, but also it makes a direct impact on everyone who is around you. Just like the ripple effect. When you're stressed, even very small incidents could trigger unexpected verbal and physical reactions. And in such instances, you may do or say things that you may regret later on. Let's imagine you're overwhelmed by office work, yet having to collaborate with a colleague that you don't get along with. Out of stress, you might say or do things that might ruin your professional reputation. Everything you've gained throughout your life, all that respect, you might lose within a blink of an eye, not just at your workplace, even in your relationships. Especially when distrust and insecurity seeps into your relationship. You might begin to feel stress. And even very small incidents could trigger arguments that might leave scars for many years to come. This is why you need to come out of these dire circumstances. Because not only it affects you, but it disrupts your relationships with everyone around you. Because even though people want to come out of this grim reality, they don't know how to. Because the world only talks about how to manage stress or how to cope with stress. No one talks about how to eradicate stress. And because of that, people continue to do things that never help them to come out of stress. But here we are going to talk about how to eradicate stress. because we are going to find the root behind your stress and uproot it. Because once the causes that give rise to your stress are no longer there, you will be able to be free from stress. Because when you have to manage stress, the list of things that you have to do is endless, right? I mean, think about everything that you do to come out of stress. There may be some among you who would turn to comfort eating. Some might go out with their friends and family. There may be some among you who would watch movies and listen to music. And some might turn up drinking or substances. But you know, right? None of these things would help you to come out of your stress. All these things are just temporary solutions that diverts your real problem. It's like putting up a plaster. Underneath, the wound will still be there. This is why we want you to eradicate stress, not to manage, not to cope with, but to eradicate stress. Because when those causes that would give rise to stress are no longer there, you will be free from stress. Let me ask you a question. If I ask you to think about situations or circumstances that you think might lead to stress, what would you come up with? Some of you might think about work-related issues like unhealthy work environment, deadlines. Some of you might think about relationship conflicts, family conflicts, divorce, breakups. And some might think about financial issues, unemployment, debt. And this list will go on, right? Because this is an endless list. Why am I asking this? Because identifying these circumstances, which we call stressors, plays a significant part in eradicating stress. Because stress is the mental reaction to the stressor. As long as we can identify the stressor and work on it, you will be able to eradicate stress. Because the stress and the stressor are like the fire and the heat. Where there's fire, there's heat. And where there's a stressor, stress will follow up. So how do we identify this stress? The only way we can identify stress is through these negative emotions that you feel. Negative emotions like anger, irritation, anxiety, depression. It is through these negative emotions that you will be able to identify the stress. But whenever you feel stressed, take a step back and try to isolate and identify the stressor behind it. Because when you isolate the stressor, you know what you are up against. It's always good to know the devil that you deal with. Now, when you isolate this stressor, there is a fundamental question that you need to ask from yourself. You have to ask, How did this become a stressor? How does something that happens in the outside world cause stress in your mind? Just imagine that you get a very tight deadline, and as soon as you get the news, you feel stressed, right? In that exact moment, you have to isolate the stressor and ask yourself this question: how does a deadline cause stress in your mind? Because it is with this fundamental question your journey to eradicate stress begins. And even for those who struggle in their relationship issues, when you feel irritated or angry, you have to identify that negative emotion and isolate the stressor. You have to find the root cause for that irritation or anger. And when you find that, ask yourself this question: how does this become a stress in your mind? So in this episode, we discussed about how stress affects your mental health and how it makes an impact on everyone around you. And most importantly, we discussed that whenever you feel stressed, try to isolate the root cause behind it. Because we are going to talk about how to uproot that root cause and eradicate stress for once and for all. So it is very important that whenever you feel stressed, isolate the stress factor and ask yourself that fundamental question that we discussed. How does something that happens in the outside world cause stress in your mind? Because in our next episode, we will discuss about the connection between your mind and events that happens around you.